Mike, do you want to do the introduction as the LCC chair? Okay. Here, why don't you sit right here? We're on? Okay. So, good evening. My name is Denny Gallaudet, and I'm here as the chair of the Sustainability Subcommittee, which is part of the Lands and Conservation Commission. And we're here to have a community workshop involving a series of grants and work that we're doing at the state level in association with what's called a Community Resilience Partnership. I'm going to be turning the mic over shortly to Kelly Rayberg here, who is with us from the Greater Portland Council of Governments. They're helping us through this process, which is to assist both Cumberland and a number of other partner towns, Yarmouth and Freeport, for example, to engage more fully with the state through this Community Resilience Partnership. It will lead, hopefully, to some grant proposals that we're going to be putting forward at the state level. These are not insubstantial, $50,000 possibility per town. And these grants will be for community action plans that we've talked about a lot that will help our town meet its climate action goals, which are to reduce carbon emissions substantially, as you'll hear in the coming years. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly, who's going to take us through a brief presentation on how the Community Resilience Partnership works. Great. So you can just go over and speak from there, Kelly, and we'll be off and running.
Great, thank you, Denny. So as he said, I am Kelly Rayberg, and I am with the Greater Portland Council of Governments. I am the Sustainability Program Coordinator, and I am helping to manage and lead towns through this community workshop. So today we'll run through what the Community Resilience Partnership is, give a brief overview on climate hazards and impacts related to climate change, and specifically Cumberland. We'll talk through the enrollment materials that are needed to enroll in the partnership, and then the overview of the priority action areas that we're hoping to eventually apply for a grant and get the money that Denny had talked about. Following this, we'll open it up to any questions and discussion. And for those in person, we have several materials around to look at. For those on Zoom, we can attach files or send through the town at a later time, and so you can view all of these. So what is the Community Resilience Partnership? It is a state-funded program supported by the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and the Future, and it is essentially trying to help municipalities improve climate resilience and improve climate adaptation. And so they are awarding grants to service providers, which is what GPCOG is serving to Cumberland, along with several other towns, and then community action grants. And so that's where the towns actually apply and get the money that they need. Kind of the structure can be a little intimidating at times, and that's okay. That's why GPCOG is here to always help. We GoPIF at the top. GPCOG is also a part of the Regional Coordinator Collaborative here, and so any questions can always come to us. And so we are serving as a service provider for Cumberland, along with 4 other towns in this grant cycle. Those other towns are Freeport, Yarmouth, Brunswick, and North Yarmouth. So the 5 cohort is making up our service provider cohort. And the way it works is we are helping all 5 of these towns to enroll in the partnership and then get them to apply for the community action grant. Towns can also choose to collaborate with each other and apply for one grant collectively. If you find that your priority overlaps with another town, you can apply as a cohort municipal action grant, in which case you could get up to $100,000 rather than a single town would get up to $50,000. And so GPCOG is here to assist through the entire process. We are also available to help kind of post-grant. If your project aligns with some of the things, we can support your actions in that way as well. So the community partnership is run kind of a grant scheduled 2 times a year. It started in this January, and the first application cycle was this spring. And 27 communities, I believe, applied for community action grants, or 27 grants representing 29 communities. Varying funding, you can get anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000. And at the spring enrollment, there were all of the applicants got funded for their grant. However, we have been told that this cycle is expected to be a little more difficult since more towns will have enrolled at that point and be applying. So just to give an overview of what has happened in our region so far, in the springtime, Windham, Bridgeton, Portland, and South Portland all applied for and received community action grants. GPCOG is now partnering with Windham to complete their town energy plan and looking at greenhouse gas emissions for municipal and community emissions. And in addition to Cumberland, who is doing a great job, Portland and South Portland also have a climate action plan, and GPCOG is also helping Falmouth currently complete their climate action plan. So we are trying to really make this a regional effort because we know that a single municipality can't always change. They can take individual steps, but it's often a regional effort to make things succeed. And so we're trying to help everyone across the region. So from this process, and as a service provider, we want to make sure that Cumberland enrolls in the partnership. And I will say, once you enroll, you are enrolled for 2 years. And so you can apply for a grant every single cycle within those 2 years. So goal is to get you to apply for a community action grant in September. You could then apply for another grant next spring, another one the following fall, and so on. And then you can choose to re-enroll after those 2 years by recommitting some of your priorities. We are also helping you with some community engagement, part of this workshop. We really want to make sure that you are working towards prioritizing climate resilience and clean energy actions, which Cumberland is doing a great job with. You already have a climate action plan, and it is great, and excited to see how that moves forward. So to step aside a little bit, I'm going to talk about climate hazards and impacts. That way we all know kind of a broad overview of what we're talking about when we talk about climate change, and honestly why you should care. You hear all these numbers, and so I'll touch on why it's important for you to understand. So first, climate hazards, we're talking about the actual effects of climate change. That can be increasing heat, rising sea levels we often hear about. I'm also going to talk about social vulnerabilities. So that's things, income, race and ethnicity, age, health. All of those affect how you respond to climate change. And those two all make up the impacts. So those are things, flooding, erosion, but also public health and all of the magnitude that goes with it. I know I've heard a number of people say, oh, the tick season is so bad this year. And part of that is because of climate change. And that's one of the impacts. So Maine is currently experiencing an increase in local climate hazards. We're seeing it today, and those hazards, which I'll run through, and all of the potential impacts. You might start to see more flooding. You can see declining water quality or overburdened systems. So I know, bear with me, there might be a few numbers being thrown at you, but to kind of give you an idea of what we're seeing today. One, there's warmer, more variable temperatures. So the state has warmed about 3 degrees since 1895, and that is most pronounced at the coast in towns like Cumberland. And Maine can then expect roughly 36 high heat days per year by 2100. High heat days are categorized as days over 90 degrees. So if you start saying, wow, it's getting hotter, you are correct. And that is compared to, typically we've only seen 1 high heat day on average per year from 1971 to 2000. We're also seeing changing precipitation. The average yearly precipitation has increased by 15% since 1895. and we're expecting an additional 5% by 2050. Now, this precipitation is going to fall mostly as rain, and so we're changing the type of precipitation we see. The graph on the screen is showing the decline in snowfall. I know I am a skier, and a lot of times the trails and mountains that I go on have less snow, and I'm needing to pump and make their own snow more often. That's because even though we're seeing more precipitation, it's falling more as rainfall rather than snow. And we're also seeing an increase in the frequency and intensity of precipitation when it happens. So those extreme storms where rain is falling, say 2 inches per hour, are happening more frequently. So not only are we having more precipitation, but they're often occurring in shorter increments. Sea level rise, I feel, is often talked about within the state of Maine. It's risen 7.5% since 1912, and there's a range of scenarios that are projecting whether it will only rise 1.6 to 2050 and 2100, all the way up to 8.8. Maine is planning for an estimated 1.5 feet increase in sea level at 2050 and the possibility of 3.6 feet. And that can lead to 15 to 20 times more flooding by 2100. And the last climate hazard is ocean warming and acidification. So Casco Bay, the temperature is increasing. In fact, it's increased by 2.5% since 1992. And the Gulf of Maine is actually heating at one of the fastest rates in the world, partially due to the geography and climate of Maine itself. So I've thrown a bunch of numbers at you, and you might say, be glazing over a little bit, but why should that matter for you? Well, one, there are a lot of health risks. As you have more heat, you have more heat illnesses, heat strokes. Pictures of Maine show the number of ED visits related to heat illness in 2003 on the left and 2017 on the right, and they are significantly increasing. As I mentioned, also ticks. There's a lot more Lyme disease going on, and that's because it's not getting as cool in the winter to kill off all the pests. And so climate change has a huge impact on your health. It's also shifting ecosystems. We've seen recent articles in the Press Herald about how the lobster industry is shifting and starting to move north. And so that's also going to affect your ecosystem. We also have terrestrial ecosystems that, with the trees, plants, wildlife, warmer weather species are going to start moving in and pushing out native Maine species, and we might see a rise of invasive species. You're also going to see a strain on critical infrastructure. You have more storms, you might lose power, the roads might buckle more. They're going to cost more money because the freeze-thaw cycle increases, there's more freeze-thaw cycles, and so the lifespan of roads are going to decrease, requiring more money to resurface, to repave, and that's going to affect you. It's going to impact the municipal tax base. And then you have, part of that is with the changing economy. I mentioned the lobster industry. One benefit, I should say, of climate change is that it will increase the summer season, and so it will increase the growing time. And so it might be a positive for agricultural industries. So we talk a lot about the negatives of climate change and things we definitely want to address, but we also have to recognize that there could be some benefits for some industries and to weigh those. You also need to think about the decline in water quality. In terms of drinking water, recreational, and what you're going to be able to, say, swim, boat. And again, this also greatly impacts the municipal tax base. There's evidence that shows that housing on kind of lakes with algal blooms significantly decrease. The property value decreases as the water quality decreases. And then we also get to flooding and erosion. You're going to see a lot more flooded roads, causing more erosion along the banks, which will then flow into the water and again decrease your water quality. So that's some of how it might impact you. And now if we look at town-wide, flooding can impact the infrastructure, homes, people. We partnered with First Street Foundation and used their flood factor modeling, which really looks at inland flooding for 2050, sorry. And we find that over 60 roads within Cumberland could be flooded by 2050 for a 100-year flood. And that includes parts of I-295 and Route 9, which are key roads within the town. So that means that neighborhoods might get cut off. Emergency services might be hard to navigate. And so getting these resources could be difficult. So understanding where these vulnerabilities or potential infrastructure problems exist can help you plan and adapt. If you know that a culvert is going to be flooded by that point, you might have to resize or understand how to affect and alter your emergency response systems. As I mentioned, ecosystems are going to change. Tidal marshes are going to have to migrate or be constrained. I have to say Cumberland is actually pretty resilient for sea level rise, but you start to then look at a lot of your aquaculture industry and the shellfish, eelgrass, all of those habitats might shift, and so that economy, the water-based economy, is going to potentially change. And then lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about the social vulnerabilities. So not everyone experiences the impacts of climate change equally, and even within the same town. And that is because your health, your income, your race, all affect how you can respond to climate change. If you are of older population, oftentimes you are not in as good of health, or you might be limited in your communication or mobility. And so they might be harder to reach in response to a natural disaster. Housing, one, if it's unaffordable, people don't have extra money to spend to repair their housing when a natural disaster occurs. Oftentimes older housing also is not equipped to withstand the increased precipitation that we're going to start seeing. And we also see a difference between homeowners and renters. Renters often, the housing might not be up to standard, might not be as well kept. They also might not be as familiar with the area to understand how to get information should a disaster occur. And so we also look at kind of this cost-burdened analysis. So if you spend 30% or more of your income on home or rental costs, it's going to be a lot harder to respond to climate disasters. And lastly, kind of state and Cumberland-specific emissions. Again, have to give Cumberland credit. Your total emissions for 2020 of metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent is only 1.6% of Cumberland County, but yet you have 2% or 2.6% of the population, which means that you are producing less emissions via transportation, I should say. So this is from Streetlight, which is a program that we run to analyze trips within the town of Cumberland to know how much emissions you're putting out. And when we normalize all of that by households, each household is putting out approximately 7.5 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per household, and that's actually the 5th lowest in the county out of all of the municipalities. And so Cumberland's doing a great job, or a better job, not saying that you can't still do better, but compared to the state, where 54% of emissions are typically related to transportation. And so really focusing on transportation and some of the EV use is a great way to lower your emissions. So to kind of shift back to the Community Resilience Partnership, I'm going to talk through and then turn it over to Denny about the enrollment materials and somewhat of the purpose of this workshop. So in order to enroll in the partnership, you have to complete 3 actions. You have to pass a municipal resolution. You have to complete a self-evaluation and list of community actions. I was going to say, 3 should actually say you complete a community workshop, which is what this is, discussing your priority action areas and projects completed to date. So those 3 things are necessary in order to enroll. And now I will pass it over to Denny in order to talk about how the town is moving forward with each of those.
Thank you, Kelly. Good evening again. My name is Denny Gallaudet. I'm the chair of the Sustainability Subcommittee. I live at 67 Range Road. So the first step is a municipal resolution that we'll be putting on the town council's agenda at a meeting in July after completing this outreach session that we're holding today. It's fairly straightforward. It identifies priority action areas that I'll be talking more about. It names the staff and committee that's involved, which we have already done, the Sustainability Committee. And we'll consider some additional language related to specific characteristics of our community. How were you going from just?
Oh, I was just using the mouse or arrows. You can scroll. Yep.
Okay, so just, okay, good. That's the left click. Then the next part, which we've done in draft form, is a self-evaluation of actions that we have already taken. And I'm not going to go into any detail other than to say that we have a pretty good list of things that we've already accomplished that we need to get done. Oh, no, I'm going to get, let me back up. Okay.
You can also use the arrows on the keyboard, I think, if it's, or just left click.
So left click? Okay. These are some of the highlights of things that we find will affect Cumberland. We do not have, as some towns do, a lot of waterways coming in across salt marshes, Scarborough, for example, and even Yarmouth, because our waterfront is fairly well protected. Nevertheless, with increasing sea levels and storm surges, there's going to be more erosion down along those properties, and we need to prepare for that. We need to check on the quality of the communication systems to deal with this, and understanding further the vulnerabilities that we have. Plans and policies, mitigation strategies, and also thinking about the social vulnerability of our community and the citizens within it. Projects that we've completed to date, I think this is something that we can be proud of, and town staff has been very helpful, as well as the council. We've completed our climate action plans in phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 was town government, school, and the town itself, and phase 2 is the business community and also the residential areas. So we completed the plan. A number of our activities are already underway. Here we have a picture of our police department that has been an early adapter of hybrid vehicles, and also going to be adopting electric vehicles. The hybrid vehicles are very suitable for police cars because they spend a lot of time idling. Over half the emissions of police cars, if they're just regular gasolines, are in the idling operations. So a hybrid turns itself off, and you get a very quick payback. I might just mention a couple of other things that we've done. We benchmarked the community carbon emissions as of 2015 and have found that we're already down about 25% as a result of a number of important actions that have been taken. The first was fuel switching, moving from oil to natural gas. which is a lower carbon-intensive fuel. Also, we built our solar field out here, which is now generating 100% of electricity, the landfill solar project for the town. We didn't anticipate, but are benefiting greatly by the very sharp increase in electric rates, which we avoided by being locked into the payments in our solar farm. Other things that have happened, the school department has done has done efficiency initiatives in the energy area. And we found also in reviewing the community that, as Kelly pointed out, over the years, over the last 5 years, the local or residential auto fleet has become more efficient, and people are just naturally undertaking or buying higher mileage cars, or more efficient cars. So a lot of progress to date, but we have some work still to go. And one of the priority, I'm going to touch on the priority actions now that we're going to ask you to consider. Our Lands and Conservation Committee has looked at this list and prioritized 10 actions for which we might apply for grants. The first is to install heat pumps or more powerful heat pumps called VRF systems to supplement the natural gas heating and cooling, or the natural gas heating in our municipal buildings, both the school, sorry, not the school, but the library and the town office. And what we're looking forward to doing in the next 10 years is to install heat pump systems that will off-take some of the heating load that's now being done by natural gas. We are going to consider installing EV chargers in public parking areas. We're going to consider adopting more policies that support local food production and consumption. By the way, these are all actions that sync nicely with the state's climate action plans. Maine can't wait, and so we're just using that language and philosophy from that document. We're going to consider initiating a community bulk purchasing system for solar and heat pumps for residents and businesses. We'll continue purchasing or leasing EVs for our municipal operations. A big step there will be, and I know the school department is looking forward to this, to switch from diesel to electric buses. The technology is almost there. It's still costly, but hopefully we'll be moving quickly on that to phase out the diesel bus fleet. Create and support an energy reduction campaign. That's really part of our second phase of a climate action plan. A new initiative would be installing incentives for clean energy industries to locate in our community. And another is to create climate change education, outreach, and education engagement programs. This is a complex area. It's very important for people to have a full understanding of what's going on and what things they can do themselves in their own households to ameliorate the problem. Establish a peer-to-peer program for checking on vulnerable communities during extreme weather events. Kelly touched on this. And to support professional development for code enforcement officers, we have one, Bill Longley, and he has to have a lot of knowledge under his belt. The shift to more efficient energy standards is going to require a good amount of professional development to help him and his colleagues do their work. So that's the 10 actions that we're going to be asking, or we're trying to put forward tonight for you to consider, and now we'll be in a position to take any questions or discussion that might be of interest to folks.
Can I say something from here? I will also say that since all of your potential priority actions align with Maine Won't Wait policies, it is no match is required from the town in order for these action grants. So you can get your up to $50,000 with no match required, since they align with state goals.
No hands raised? colleagues who's very knowledgeable on this subject, and I'm sure he has a million questions, but he's saying he's going to catch us later. Okay.
We will work with the town to give copies of all handouts that we have here and maps and materials to kind of help understand vulnerabilities and ranking priority projects. So I know that future survey and information will be coming from the town to get your input.
Yeah, we will plan to develop a survey on the town website that people can log into and express their views. So I'll be working with our town council's experts in this area to have an opportunity for folks to weigh in on these questions, particularly the 10 action items that we're proposing to move forward on. So with that, shall I bring the meeting to a close? Thanks for your attention.